Somaxis. And Somaxis is a wearables technology company. They just had a really highly successful Indiegogo campaign for their first wearable device that has medical applications that measure human muscle interaction and interface. So you can do things like biofeedback, as well as some other interesting things that we're exploring around games. And so I would love for Alex to showcase his, and then we'll bring all of our speakers up, but we'll turn it over to Alex right now.
All right.
Alex, thank you.
Thanks so much. All right. Anyone want to volunteer for this? I'm going to be putting a sensor on you, and this is going to be measured for you. That was quick. All right.
Oh, Blaine, come on.
So I'm just going to have you
He's not
sit
playing.
right here. Yeah, right. Pay you your $100 later. All right, you just have a seat. And I'm going to put this on your shoulder, okay? So maybe you could just unbutton the top button of your shirt. That would be great. And then I'll explain after we get you going through the good English.
I had a little caffeine. Might affect the
Yeah.
They're gonna show me naked. That's why I'm scared to look around. Might be seeing something on that.
So while I'm setting this up, the name of this sensor is called the Cricket, and this sensor measures a number of physiological parameters, most generally electrophysiology data, which means it can measure your muscles, it can measure your heart, it can measure your brain, and there's also a 3-axis accelerometer on it. And as was mentioned, I grew up in a clinic that was using technology like this to retrain the stress response in order to teach people how to recondition their reactions to physiological stressors at work. People that have repetitive strain injuries, carpal tunnel, tendonitis, certain types of conditions that are due to overuse and inflammation of the muscles. All right, let's try this. Attempting to multitask.
Anybody filming it?
So I need to do something real quick. Sorry about the delay.
You want a better shot?
I need technical difficulties. What's going on? So can you go ahead and, I just want to see if you can just like show your shoulders for a second.
Like up or like forward?
Yeah, just up, that's fine.
Just do a little disco move. Yeah, there we go.
Like that.
There you go, boy.
Uh-huh.
New York style.
Everybody in the audience, roll your shoulders. Let's get a little thing going on. All right.
Can you relax for a second now? You're doing great. All right. So, do you use a smartphone by any chance?
I have two smartphones on me.
Great.
Yes.
I've got the Nexus 4 and the Apple.
All right. Do you have Facebook installed on either of these by any
I have
chance?
Facebook on both of them.
All right.
Separate accounts.
Okay. So open up whichever one you want.
Who are you tonight, Blake? There you go. Open up that account.
That's all in Chinese.
That's okay. Open up the English account.
So what we're looking at here is a measure of the tension levels in these upper trapezius muscles, and this is linked basically to the involuntary stress response. And the challenge in creating the user interface for this, you could just ignore me and do what, I don't know, use Facebook the way you might use it for that.
I'm going to
And actually, can you use your left, or use your left hand? Because I actually put this on the left side, which I probably should have done. Okay.
Why don't you post about us?
I'm going to post it on
Take
my
a picture of
Twitter.
the audience. There you go.
So, so basically, traditionally the way that this information is visualized is you have a therapist or someone who is looking at a live graph.
It's true.
And this graph basically shows the live tension levels in certain muscle groups. And then the therapist will use different types of techniques and interventions to basically teach the person how to retrain their muscle use. And these are typically people with injuries or problems of some sort. So the challenge is really how do you create something called interoception? Interoception is the ability to, it's almost like having a sixth sense. If your five senses are what you see and smell and perceive and touch, etc., then this interoception is the internal sense of what's going on inside you, to be able to feel the difference between tension and lack of tension. And it's really interesting because if you tell someone, relax your muscles, a lot of times they'll say, okay, my muscles are relaxed. But then when you actually hook them up to a machine which can give them that feedback, they'll be, 10 times the normal level. And so
There's no sensor in the picture.
that's true. And you should probably keep your shirt on.
Best selfies ever, right? Selfie.
Exactly. This is me disrobing at a presentation.
How should I post it? What's your Twitter?
Don't have one, actually.
It's got a website though.
I do have a website.
Website.
It's somaxis.com.
You can tweet at TransmediaSF, at TransmediaSF.
So the challenge is, how do you create a feedback mechanism that teaches people how to retrain and how to sense the internal properties of muscle, of stress, of tension. So whether we're trying to create an interface basically that monitors all the different elements of stress, from the cardiovascular components to the neurological components to the muscular components to the postural components. It can monitor all of these things and provide the user with live feedback so that they can change their behavior in real time. And this is extremely challenging. In traditional biofeedback, the only kind of live feedback you might get that a therapist wouldn't be able to give you is an alarm or a threshold. If you go past a certain tension level, the alarm goes off, and we built that in. But one of the things that we did here was also to build in a new feature where, for example, every 5 minutes it actually reads your level to you, and it'll tell you a number. And the idea is that gradually over time you'll start to associate different internal states with this number that's being read to you. If it only tells you your levels when you're above a certain threshold, you won't learn to feel the difference between 15 microvolts and 150 microvolts if your threshold's at 10. Or you might not learn to feel the difference between like 9 and 2, which is really significant. A muscle that's relaxed is always at 2 microvolts, for example. So part of what we've been really playing around with is how do you create a continuous monitor with live feedback that's non-invasive, that doesn't interfere with people's lives, it can't be really obnoxious. We also put a haptic driver on it, so it can also vibrate as a more passive way of giving you this feedback mechanism. So he's actually doing pretty well here. He's not actually using his left hand, but and I should have put it on the right side.
Sorry, what was your name again?
Alex.
Are you on the list for the event, right?
I know. Yeah, I'm one of the 3 speakers.
It'd be easier for you to put the website again.
Somaxis. SOMAXIS.
Yes.
I like this guy. Very active.
Yeah, exactly.
SOMAXIS.
How does that change who's asking you stuff? Does it change anything
What?
tension-wise?
So a lot of people do active listening. So if you give them live feedback, yeah, that's right. If you give them live feedback and say just sit there and do nothing, they'll easily be able to turn off their muscles and say, okay, this is great. I'm now in control. But the minute that you introduce stressors or some of the behavior patterns that we're used to doing, that's when it becomes really difficult to control. So I pace when I'm on the phone, for example, and I do a lot of like, this kind of a thing. And it turns out every mammal on the planet, when we're stressed out, have this involuntary bracing pattern. So one of the ways that you can monitor the physiological stress response is actually by looking at this specific muscle group and looking for that pattern. And it's just about this time when usually people in the audience are like, yeah. So one of the interesting things is that the link between psychological stress and physiological tension is not one directional. So psychological stress causes physiological tension, but if you control the body, the mind actually follows. So there's several types of psychological interventions that essentially say, well, we're going to try to address stress and combat stress without working with the mind at all directly, by just saying, let's focus on breath, let's focus on muscle tension, let's focus on everything else except for the problems which you think you're really, really stressed about. And it actually, the association between stress and tension is so strong, and it's bidirectional, so that when you control one, your stress levels actually decrease as well. It doesn't necessarily make them go away, but it improves the situation. So typically, so he's at about a 59, 60 right now. And what would be most effective is, now try doing that same thing and like dropping your shoulders a little bit, and you can still like, navigate the phone.
So this is an app that Chinese people use, and according to this, a girl named Zhao Jieching is within 100 yards of me. This girl, Zhao Jieching. Is anybody using WeChat, a Chinese girl?
She's Cambodian, not Chinese.
Cambodian?
She is.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, of course, we're using WeChat.
Are you on, if I do like the people search, am I going to see your account?
Okay, this is
And then
a
it
different
is.
user experience.
Yeah, let's transition to questions. Sure. Hey.
Okay, hi. There was an interesting product that was premiered last year at Wisdom. That was there was an individual who was a neuroscientist who'd gone all around the world and studied monks and studied their brain waves at the time of resting. And the idea was to kind of calibrate the world's kind of brain waves to the kind of the meditative status of monks. And it was really fascinating, but my question to him was, isn't that a little bit counterproductive when you're at the office, for example, and you have to get something done? So how do you differentiate the patterns that people have when they're actively engaged with an idea and solving a problem and excited about that, versus when they're stressed out? Is that why you're sort of triangulating neural patterns and physical patterns in muscle groups?
Yeah.
And actually, I love this question. Did everybody hear her question? It was an outstanding question, is how do you differentiate? And one of the things that I'm really interested in wearables, and Alex and I had a conversation at a health and gaming event that we were at, about the uses of this, not only for physical therapy and relaxation techniques and technology, but how can you use this for things like gaming, as a gaming interface, right? How can you actually adjust and change? Sometimes you want to be stressed, sometimes you want to be relaxed. Because we know always that stress is not a bad thing, right? When we lift weights, that's a stress, but it builds our muscles. And so if you might, in this UX context, I would love you to answer that question. Thank you very much.
Sure. And did everyone hear the question? Okay, great. So I think that the best way to address this is to look at like the different modalities. So for example, you have heart rate and heart rate variability. And there's also this new metric which uses the EKG signal and looks at the ratio of two very low frequencies to determine the sympathetic to parasympathetic activation ratio. You combine that with muscle tension and mental engagement, and then you can start to differentiate between if someone is just excited, or if they've drank a lot of coffee, or if they're actually stressed out. And I think that muscle data is actually a very unique one, because that's really one of the ones that hasn't been very well explored in this context, to try to integrate it with these other modalities. I'd be lying if I said it was all completely well understood. Like, this is still something we're developing, obviously. But to put it in some context, so my father did a lot of this training where he was teaching people how to retrain their stress response. And so he came up, biofeedback therapy, so-called, is a very broad term, and it means like 100 different things to different people. It's a tool, and you can use that tool in different ways. there used to exist something called relaxation therapy, where you basically just put on the sensors and the lights get dimmed and you listen to some relaxing music, maybe a guided meditation, and you turn off your muscles and you feel fantastic and you zone out for an hour, and it's kind of like getting a massage. And you walk out and you're all blissed out. And then you go back to work, and all the behaviors that caused you the muscle pain in the first place immediately come back. So what my dad did, he had a master's in clinical psychology, is he developed an operant conditioning-based model of training where you start with very, very simple behaviors, and you teach people first how to associate like relaxation with certain internal states, and you gradually progress and build them up with more and more complex tasks, so that they build up motor memory for how to minimize the stress response and control it as they're actively engaging in the types of multidimensional stressors like typing and mousing and talking on the phone. He would progress so that you get to the point where you're balancing a golf ball on the tray while counting backwards from 100 by sevens, and there's like music playing, and you have to recall certain elements of your surroundings. And the whole idea is gradually, over the course of like a number of appointments, build the person up to the point where you can have all of those stressors and still be in a state internally that is completely devoid
Yes.
or minimizing the stress.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's really the key, is that you have to make, like that's the difference between operant conditioning and classical conditioning. You can't just tell someone, hey, turn off your muscles. Like, what does that mean? Like, you really have to, like, this is an internal sense, and you have to just learn it like you're learning to play basketball. You can't, like, explain to someone how to play basketball. They just have to go out there and then do some basic drills, and then you, like, you know, learn how to do free throws, and then you learn, like, some dribbling skills, and eventually, like, if you do this enough, like, you develop these skills in such a way that you can perform and even do it under pressure. So learning how to use your body in a different way in the context of stress is exactly like learning how to play a different sport that you've never played before, because we typically have a lot of patterns of use that are drilled in for 30, 40, 50 years, and relearning that can be quite a challenge. And that's where the UI and the continuous feedback really has to be extremely clever. Maybe last question.
Hey, I know we've got a bunch more questions, but I'd like to actually take a chance to thank Blaine and get him off of the, thank you very much, Sue. And I know that we've got a bunch of questions, and I want to get my other panelists up, because you know, I would love to start asking some of these questions in general. And I see two out there, and I know that they're going to be for Alex. So, I want you to hold on to those. But as Alex was just saying, while we get Aaron and Marco back up here, he was talking about this idea of playing basketball, right? You can't just tell somebody how to play basketball. But the interesting thing about the way that the human brain works with user interaction is if you tell somebody who knows a little bit how to play basketball to focus and concentrate on how to hit the shot from the free throw line, right? We all know what the free throw line is, right? You get fouled, and you get to take a free shot. If you get them to focus on that in their mind, they actually get better and better at it, even though they're not physiologically practicing. So I'm interested if you might just talk a little bit about how the mind-body and the body-mind, right? How does the mind control the body? Are you looking at, with your wearable devices, to go the other way? You're looking at training the muscles to affect the mind. Are you looking at the mind-body connection as well?
I think the short answer is yes, all of the above. This is still a nascent field, and so part of what becomes really interesting is looking at complex behaviors and how you learn to integrate a lot of the technologies. For instance, in indoor positioning, this is now becoming possible because you're merging a lot of different sensor modalities like Bluetooth and accelerometer and GPS, and now you can start to navigate inside buildings. But until all those technologies were in the same place at the same time, it wasn't really possible to develop the algorithms. Now that they're all located in the smartphone, now this is being created. And I think the same thing is happening in the wearable space. So now that it's becoming possible to have these technologies inside sensors that, you know, this used to cost $10,000 for a little machine like this that can monitor your electrophysiology data, and that didn't even have an accelerometer. Now that the price is dropping to $100 for a sensor, and we're getting some ubiquity, now I think this is a real opportunity for designers to come together and developers and to sort of help co-create this.
I just want to say, I'm from New York, I just moved here, but in layman's terms, it is so stressful in New York. And to answer this young lady's question here, I mean, I'm sitting here, I'm stressed just listening to you. You know, I'm detoxing from moving here just 1 month. And, you know, just to understand that, yes, stress is a good thing, especially when you have your adrenaline going, working on Wall Street and all that great stuff. But we in New York try and control so much of our calm. And we're always so high that to wear this, this would go off the roof, because then you're sitting down and if you have a measuring stick that says, okay, you're gonna blow that gasket, calm down, you're gonna blow that gasket, it will make us then think twice and keep us calm, and then we'll do our job better. So in one way, I could really see this doing exceptionally well on a high level of people who have a lot of stress that don't need to be so physically, but maybe their heart rate might be too high, and they may have a heart problem.
I think
So-
and somebody needs to give Eldridge a hug. Anybody?
I need it.
Welcome to San Francisco. We're happy you're here. But you know, one of the things I think, and I think that to balance off of Alex's point and Eldridge's point, that there are so many uses of this new technology, and one of the things that's phenomenal for us as designers and strategists, communication strategists and product strategists, entertainment strategists, is that these things are getting to be so ubiquitous and so inexpensive. And it's just amazing when we put the technology into the hands of the creative class, what we'll be able to do with it. And that's one of the reasons that we wanted to put together this panel for you, is because, you know, our transmedia community are people that think about design and development and products and projects that really cross the gamut. And, you know, and some of us are thinking about medical applications, and others of us are thinking about games and design and communications. But for all of us now, these types of technologies that Aaron and Alex are representing are accessible. And these are the types of things that we'll be able to develop and to design for. And it's a really exciting time.
Great job, Beth.
So I have some questions here. You had a question? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was just wondering, like, does the interface really train people to be in touch with, like, their somatic experience? Because it seems sort of like an intellectual training where you're understanding your somatic experience with your mind. But in order to really, like, understand and manipulate your body, it has to be a somatic awareness.
Right. So part of this is building associations and learning the interoception, right? So it's starting to be able to correlate what you're feeling internally with an external state. So if you have a therapist in front of you, they're gonna hook you up and run you through a profile. And once they've determined where your problem is, they're going to basically point out to you when you are being triggered into a higher state and give you certain cues in order to release your muscles and to control your tension.
Right, but is it like actually helping you pick up on the cues without the technology? Like, can you become better at that over time?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And I think that the best technologies are the ones that you don't have to wear forever. Like, this isn't meant to be a crutch. This is meant to build a sense of them. So like, for instance, like, I don't need these sensors because I was trained at a very young age how to do it. Once you learn the process, you really don't require it. The only people that would need to wear it continuously is if you have like an extremely dangerous kind of job where you're doing a lot of heavy lifting or assembly or something like that. And then, like, you know, it can help prevent the risk of static injuries by keeping, you know, by just giving you an alarm when things are at an excessively high level.
Yes.
Aaron, is there, with the remote robot that allows you to basically commute in, are there any plans to add any more body language indicators than just a screen? Because so much of how we communicate is via body language, and some robots have added little arms and things for Skyping. Is there any plans to integrate that sort of technology, or is it all just based on the screen right now?
So there's two ways to look at that problem. There are a lot of remote presence devices that came out over the past couple of years, and many have different design philosophies. As Suitable Tech, we have a design philosophy to very much respect and emulate the social norms that currently exist today. So the short answer to that is adding on additional mechanisms costs more money and adds reliability, becomes a huge engineering burden. It's not that appealing, because that doesn't really, right now, that doesn't really increase our sales to make it more costly. Instead, we take the philosophy that the screen and the face, we have the largest screen of any of them out on the market, and really respecting the social norms. For example, we don't allow easy video and audio recording of conversations, because when you're talking to somebody, you don't do that. You tell somebody you're recording the conversation. I had a number of journalists use the Beam to attend a trade show about a month ago. They're like, oh, I want to easily record the conversation, but we don't want to make that easy. That's out of the social norm. Same thing, if you're driving a Beam from somewhere else, we don't have a whole lot of ways to prevent you. You can drive into a wall if you want to, but the social expectation is if you were there in person, you're not going to be driving into walls, you're driving into people. Instead, we focus on very low latency, very reactive driving. So when you drive it, you're cognizant that there's people around you, and really good audio and visual, great visuals, and you see the room, see the floor, see the people around you. So we're really focusing on having the person be able to interact with the space from an audio and visual standpoint. That's our first step. That's our minimal viable product.
Jen?
I have a question for all three of you. So in a month or 2 weeks, or whenever it is, Spike Jonze' movie Her will be coming out. And I think it's going to usher in the era of pop culturize this whole thing together. So operating system with user design, persona, research, interface that helps people relax, and basically this character that finds love and empathy. So my question is, if we've designed for empathy based on what's recognizable, because that's empathy this way, how do we switch to this next version of humans, which will be designing based on quantified results? So 10 years from now, you'll be able to know if someone loves you or not. Unless they're faking their data, because they know we can fake things in some ways, right? But I'm saying, so how does that change when we realize that what we create in our own image may not be what we actually need, and we're going to have to take on a whole different way? And I think each of you have that kind of, because this pop culture is about to shift, and this idea that we can fall in love with what we create, and it may not look like us, but it'll give us things that become better versions of who we are.
Okay. How many people here are parents? You fall in love with what you create, and then they don't turn out to be what you expect.
Are you familiar with the movie coming out? Are you familiar with this movie?
Scarlett Johansson just won Best Actress actually at the Role Film Festival like
It's
a few weeks ago for that role.
Yeah, it's a great question though.
You never see her, which
You never see her.
It's a spectacular question, because I think that it goes to something that I was asking Marco earlier. And I think that, both Aaron and Alex should be able to address this, because, we are often as human beings dishonest with ourselves, with what we want and with what we project, and we want a mirror vision of ourselves, but really do we, right? And so, yeah.
And I'm actually speaking mostly to Aaron. I find it perplexing that for all of you, but that we create these robots to be just like us, and it's like that's actually not the robots. Almost like we're not respecting what they're about and what we're creating. And in the vein of singularity, when that's 2080, whenever we think about the robots and age of spiritual machines, but putting that aside for a second, designing for something that we respect what we create, but also helps extend who we are.
So, I hate humanoid robots. I'll put it there. There are plenty of large companies out there with humanoid robot research projects that don't really do anything meaningful, but except be like a trade show piece. And you're right, there are robots that are intrinsic to doing things well that don't look like a human. Humans were so general purpose that the hand is almost useless. It's kind of, we're building robotics to augment the human body and make it stronger, and like there's gloves and there's the exoskeletons, there's phones that's serving as second brains. What if we had 4 arms? Robots are better when they're actually single purpose, which is why I said in my talk you have to rewrite everything you think you know about robotics, because a humanoid is such a bad idea, and the legs are utterly useless in most points. You can do a lot with wheels, and then it doesn't fall over. But I actually read a book recently called Player Piano. It's a book written a long time ago. I don't know if anyone's heard it.
Kurt Vonnegut.
Yeah. Okay. And the reason why someone told me to read this book is I'm constantly asked the problem, what happens when robots take all jobs? And I want to give a good answer to this, because robots don't replace dance or actors or art or designers.
Here.
Robots won't be able to design design anything. Robots are a reflection of work we've already done, but they're useless for work we have yet to discover and uncover and do. They're not good for fun, they're not good for play, they're not good for entertainment. Well, in terms of toys, they're entertaining, but it takes somebody to decide what, it takes a person to design and decide what the entertaining experience is. But this book is so bleak because it says the machines are doing everything, but there's two classes of people. There's the engineers and then there's everyone else who can't make money. And I finished this book. And it's a very great book.
What's the name?
And I finished this a week ago, and I'm like, I don't want to live in that kind of world. It's
Welcome to
just
Silicon
so
Valley.
depressing.
Yeah.
And you know, if it comes, I honestly say this, I want to make robots happen for the right reasons, and if there's a time when rules need to be put in place, I'm also keeping an eye out for that.
Yeah.
Great.
Because there's so many companies who can't hire enough people to do their jobs right now.
Right.
Logistics companies can't hire enough people to move boxes. There's a poultry factory in South Carolina that moved to a depressed area of South Carolina because they didn't get enough people. That might be a way to get enough more people to go work at a chicken plant. They're tough, awful jobs, but there are jobs that are out there and people aren't working them because they're tough and awful. And so the no jobs available thing I sighed. I'm like, well, there are jobs. You don't want to do it.
If we get user interaction right, can we fall in love with what we create?
See, well, there's Pygmalion story. You just fall in love with
Right.
extension. The problem is that I see with that, it's the same problem that I see with research on online dating. We can be trusted to know what we will find interesting. And it's the same question that I was answering the gentleman before, saying people lie, but not because they lie, but because they don't know themselves enough to project outside of themselves into something that has a life of its own.
Right.
So you will find points of interest in communalities, but experiences that have shaped an individual in who they are not going to be present in that. So we will find that we are more compatible with the creations that we make. We may yet get very bored with them quickly. So until both robotics jump the usefulness barrier and turn into something where they augment themselves in their own way that we had not input, it'll be a very limited personal emotional interest, aside from the entertainment factor and the usefulness factor, lifting, shifting, moving. But the problem is we can't, it's again, we self-design, but then it doesn't, it's on the other side of the mirror. If it's too close, it becomes extremely boring.
Can I add one antidote to that though? There's an interesting phenomenon though, when I design a robot for industrial use, it's still a person and that is buying it. And making the robot more likable, even if it's an expensive robot meant for only a hard ROI, it kind of tips them over the edge of wanting to buy it, right?
Well,
And that's an interesting design aspect where it might be hardline ROI for a harsh use case, but if it looks nice, they want to buy it.
Well, actually, I want to respond to that, which is there are about 5 things people respond the most to in any kind of interface. One is a face. And so anything that has an anthropomorphic face will get a better response. And that is also why we have visual designers on top of usually UX designers, is because we respond to beauty and symmetry and proportion and all the things that we tend to find appealing for, whether it's genetic reasons to sheer visual delight. We have a strong response to them. So an anthropomorphic robot will always be more likable than a box with wheels.
Except it becomes uncanny very quickly. You have to be careful with designers. I tell designers never to design the face, but imply that people will anthropomorphize it so as to make the design in the direction we want. But if you put any face on a robot, it actually gets an uncanny valley super fast. So it's a delicate balance.
So it's interesting, and I know we have another couple questions in the audience, but I want to ask one because, you know, all of our speakers here tonight, it's interesting for me how the worlds of user experience are colliding with other worlds, right? We've got folks that are coming from the medical industry and then coming into this user experience around entertainment and communication. Robotics, and Aaron actually has a strong background in industrial robotics, and these are coming more into service robots and these robots that we're looking to interact with. And Marco actually almost on the opposite side, you know, comes from a more entertainment and design orientation, but now works for a medical company. And as these worlds are coming together, it seems to me all the more important that the experience that we're creating for users. I mean, Erin, you mentioned that, you know, you want to humanize to a certain level. It helps actually sell things, but also not to create that humanization that we see in some of the robots that we're creating for autism or other types of studies. So how are these worlds coming together for you all, and how does that help us to define the types of user experiences that we can expect and anticipate?